My Detroit Lions. The Detroit Lions paradox continues as the Lions did win their final game of the season against the hated Green Bay Packers, 37-30. But when they win, somehow they always lose, as we had a chance to get the number one overall pick and did not take advantage of that opportunity and somehow won this game against the Packers. It was funny in the fourth quarter. Even the announcers were bringing this up after the Jacksonville Jaguars had somehow beat the Indianapolis Colts, which is I don't think anyone had any idea. They kind of just beat them down too. It wasn't really even close.
Yeah, there was some money won if you took that leap of faith that Jacksonville was going to pull their heads out of their ass for the final game of the season against a team who needed to win to make the playoffs.
Yeah.
Like who's playing pretty well and has the best rusher in all of football. Like I'm saying the words, I still can't believe it was even set up for Detroit to get the number one seed.
I couldn't believe it either. The announcers brought it up during the game. The Lions were losing late in the fourth quarter, and they even said at the time, if the Lions just took a knee at this point, they would guarantee themselves a number one overall pick. And the very next play, Lions throw a touchdown pass and then get their second of two fourth quarter interceptions to cinch the game. Of course, I mean, it's great. I'm happy for them. But it comes down to this is their seventh win in 15 games. They're 7-8 in meaningless games since 2015. I brought this stat up a couple weeks ago, as they've now had two more meaningless games and they've gone 500 in those. So they're bordering on 500 in meaningless games over the last five or so years. Meanwhile, they're 20 games below 500 in meaningful games. They are 40, 60, and 1. So that's the source of my frustration, that when it doesn't matter, we somehow have a better record than when it does matter. But, you know, there is a minor difference between the number one and number two pick, but it is significant at the same time. In this case, I think the Lions are probably going to luck out in a couple different ways. In that, first of all, I think Jacksonville is probably going to look for an offensive tackle with the number one pick. As they've already drafted plenty of defensive ends, which would be the Lions' number one need. There's also two marquee defensive ends that are at the top of the draft boards, everyone's draft boards, with Kayvon Thibodeau and Aiden Hutchinson. So Lions are going to get a good player. They're going to fill a need one way or the other. But just the idea, it continues to drive me crazy that they had that opportunity there to have anything they wanted, not to have to worry about anything in a meaningless game. That, you know, it's nice that they did improve their record to 3-13-1 now. I saw somebody post on Twitter, they are the greatest 3-13-1 team in NFL history. And I cannot dispute that, mainly because there's never been a 3-13-1 team in NFL history. But so I got into a little bit of a Twitter spat with a few people, you know, people trying to say there's no difference between the number one and number two pick. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? There is. And my comeback was, what's the difference between being 3-13-1 and 2-14-1? And then it just sort of devolved from there. But I'd say it's less meaningful winning a meaningless game when you could have had that number one pick. But that's just my eternal rant against the Lions. There were a lot of positives this season, believe it or not, though. I'm gonna put a positive spin on this.
Ooh, okay.
As it's not easy to do with a 3-13-1 team, but of course, part of the story of this final game was Dan Campbell, Danimal Cannibal, as I like to call him, was playing cannibal games once again. He had a fake punt, which failed. More fourth down attempts. I think they set the record. I do believe the Lions actually set the record for fourth down attempts and conversions, actually, believe it or not. Even though they were well below 50%, they converted more than anyone ever has. They had a double reverse pass for a touchdown. They had a flea flicker that worked. So he's still playing his fun games. But overall, if I'm gonna sum up the Lions season, I think I'd have to give Dan Campbell a passing grade. as in his first year as a coach, even with such a horrific record. He had nothing to start with. The Lions roster was garbage when he took over. He had a horrific culture coming off the tails of
True.
Matt Patricia and what the fuck? I already forgot his fucking name, Bob. What the fuck? So to go from essentially zero to just above zero, it was a Herculean task in some ways. So I feel like a foundation has possibly been built in Detroit. There's some positivity and it's palpable. Like you can tell the players love Dan Campbell, and I think he's very likable, especially when you can consider the old regime. It's night and day. So, and he's shown a lot of guts. He's shown himself not to be a hypocrite, as a lot of NFL coaches do, preaching courage and bravado, and then shriveling up into a ball anytime it comes to making big calls in crunch time, where he's made some big calls late in games, and they most of the time do not work, but he's still made those calls. He's also had the benefit of being in a lost season pretty much, where he can kind of throw caution in the wind with few consequences. So, but I think overall it's a net positive with Dan Campbell. I think next year is going to be the real test when he doesn't have that luxury. When I think Lions fans are going to demand wins. I think we don't believe we're going to be a playoff team next year necessarily. I think we can look towards being 500. 3 wins will be unacceptable. So he's gonna have to show this is gonna work. I think there are building blocks to make this work beyond his culture building. Penei Sewell has been a fantastic revelation that I was hoping he'd be for the offensive line. The Lions even piecemeal had to put together their offensive line after significant injuries to Taylor Decker and Frank Ragnow. They had the top 10 rushing attack in the NFL, which they have not done since the Barry Sanders years, which is more than significant. So they're building from the lines out, and I think that's the way to do it. And you're seeing how that could work going forward. I feel like they have the potential for a decent offense next year. The other emergence of Amon-Ra St. Brown, who had his 6th consecutive 8-catch game, which sets a Lions franchise record. Calvin Johnson was never even able to do that. It's also the fifth longest streak in NFL history. So we've got a serious slot receiver right there. If we could pair him with a top, maybe a late first round pick that we'll be getting from the Los Angeles Rams, maybe we can pair him with a top wide receiver right there, or even a free agent wide receiver. The Lions have $40 to $50 million worth of cap space to work with.
Dang, girl.
So they also have 3 of the top 34 picks, I think it'll be, in this draft. So they have a lot of capital to work with, whether it be draft picks or cap space. So there are ways to address their offensive issues. The key is addressing the defense, and that's where getting a game wrecker at defensive end will be paramount. They need a linebacker, of course. I'll get deeper into the draft breakdown, as we still have about 4 months before we need to actually get into the details of that. But overall, I feel strangely, and this is the Lions paradox, after such a terrible season, I feel strangely positive just because you see those building blocks, and I like my coach. At least he's not a fucking dickhead like the previous one. So I believe Brad Holmes has shown he had a good draft, with those 2 players I mentioned. We'll see if he can build on that, because this draft is the key right now coming up. So I think that's basically all I need to say about the Lions so far. Like I said, I'll be breaking down their draft options going forward. But that might be the end of Lions talk for a bit. We'll see.
Wow.
We did. I guess the only other news would be they decided to let go offensive coordinator Anthony Lynn, who I believe I called Adam Lind or Adam Linth or something earlier in the season. I didn't even know who he was. Whatever his name is, not gonna be here anymore. He's gone. He was pretty irrelevant as he hadn't been calling plays since halfway through the season when Dan Campbell took those duties over too. So that was the only news of the week besides the meaningless victory over the Packers.
Word Hole Media.